of our time together, let's open up to Joshua chapter 9. Joshua chapter 9. And for those of you that have not been here, because maybe you're brand new or you're a brand new freshman just coming in, we have been in the book of Joshua for a little while now. We started at chapter 1, and we're working our way through. In fact, we started even before that, Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus, and just all the way through to Joshua. And here we are, and we've seen Joshua have some experience, some really good victories already early in the book, and we've seen him have some challenges, and today is another one of those challenges. Joshua chapter 9, and we'll get to that in a minute. Joshua chapter 9. Yes, as you're opening up to Joshua chapter 9. Yesterday morning, I was working around my house, my yard. I love to be outside doing things, yard work, working in the garden, and finished in the backyard, and then decided I was going to go to the front. I really needed to mow my front lawn because I had been gone for a week, and it's just been really busy. And so yesterday was the day, like, okay, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to mow my lawn, and then I'm going inside to finish studying. And as I was mowing the lawn, I've got a big tree in my front yard. It's a fruitless mulberry. Not that any of you care, but I'm just giving you useless details, just because. It's a pretty big tree, and it's got some really long branches, really low branches. That was on purpose. I like to just kind of let things grow naturally. The tree I actually trimmed quite a bit, but had some really long branches that were pretty heavy now, and they were hanging pretty low. And I've realized for a little while that they're hanging pretty low, and somebody's going to hit their head on them. You know, I'm not very tall, and neither is my family, but somebody's going to hit their head. So I thought, okay, these branches need to go, and I've slowly been trimming them. And yesterday was like, okay, let me get rid of this one branch, and then I'll be done. I'll go inside. And so I started to trim it with my, what you call, loppers or cutters, whatever. But then it got to a point where I needed my chainsaw, and I needed to also get up on a ladder. So I went and got my little ladder. I've got a few ladders. One of them is a shorter one, so I got on that and got the chainsaw out, or the trimmer. And I realized right away, like, okay, I'm going to need my taller ladder. So set the small ladder aside. I go to the back to get my taller ladder. It's like 6 foot or something. And I go get that. I set that all up, and I've got my chainsaw in hand. It's not started yet because you don't ever want to climb a ladder while you've got a chainsaw running in your hand. But I took like 2 steps up to get on my ladder, and wouldn't you know it, I got attacked by a wasp, and it just came and stung me right in the forearm. And any of you ever been stung by a wasp? Okay. How many? Thank you yes, a couple of you have. How many of you have been stung by a bee? Okay, yeah, bee. So it's a little more common, but since I'm so special, I get stung by wasps, right? And I am told that wasp stings are, they're worse. I do not know if that's true because it's been such a long time since I was stung by a bee. I really don't remember. But a wasp sting, man, it hurts. And then the bad thing is, with a bee, they'll sting you and they'll leave their stinger in there and then they die. A wasp, they don't do that. They'll sting you, take off, come back, sting you again, whatever. And so I got stung, and so I've got, natural reflexes. I've got, in my hand, I've got a chainsaw. Natural reflex would have been to, like, slap the thing. But I couldn't do that because I'm holding a chainsaw, which wasn't running, but it's like hit my arm with a chainsaw. That would have made it much better, right? So it's kind of like, and I jumped off the ladder, and it's like, put my chainsaw down, I rubbed my arm, and I can see this thing buzzing around, kind of shoot it away. It's like, okay, we're safe, and okay, let's get back up there and jump up. And guess what? I took like 2 or 3 steps up. Guess what happened? Anybody want to guess? What do you think? I got stung again. Yes, I got stung again. And now I'm thinking, like, are you crazy? Like, is this the same wasp? Now, I've been stung several times by wasps, actually in my front yard over the years, doing yard work. We used to have a bush and had some wasp in it. And I still remember it. I was trimming it, and I saw this wasp shoot out of the bush, and I just actually watched it. It shot up, and then it went and stung me in the arm. And it was like, freak out. And then I've been stung. I've been stung several times. I'm told that wasps, that they actually leave some kind of like marker in you or something. I don't know if that's true. Some of you might be on the science side, but so that other wasps actually will, you'll get stung more frequently. I don't know if that's true, but I've been stung several times by wasps. Anyhow, I get stung a second time. And now it's like, okay, what's going on? This wasp hate me? Does it know who I am? Like, what's going on? And so I kind of like, I take a step back. Well, then I realize that there's a few wasps kind of buzzing around the bottom of one of my steps on my ladder. So then what I do is I kind of do one of these numbers and look, there was a wasp nest underneath there. And as I'm climbing up that thing, they're trying to protect their home. And so they come out and try to kill me, is what they were trying to do. And I got stung twice. I, took one of my rakes and kind of knocked the wasp nest down and, got rid of it. And then I was able to get back up there and finish the job, finish cutting the branch. There's oftentimes danger that lies beneath something that looks harmless. I was supposed to be using my ladder to accomplish my purpose of trimming the branch. What I did not know was that ladder that I was supposed to be using to accomplish my purpose was actually hiding a danger. Now, you might say that a wasp is not really a danger, but nobody likes to get stung. I didn't like it either time. But it was hiding something that was dangerous to me or harmful or hurtful to me. There's really not much of a difference in the Christian life. There's oftentimes things that are hiding beneath beneath the surface of something that looks good. Something looks good, but oftentimes underneath that, as you go a little bit deeper, you find out that though it looked good on the surface, in reality there was something hiding there that was harmful toward me. And the Joshua chapter 9 is what that's what it's all about. Joshua chapter 9. Now, in Joshua chapter 9, the Joshua and the children of Israel, at this point they've conquered Jericho. And then in Jericho, they didn't know, but there was a man named Achan who had stolen some things from Jericho that he was not supposed to take. So when they went to the next city called Ai, they went in thinking, hey, we got this. And 36 of their soldiers died. And the reason that 36 of the soldiers died was because Achan had sinned and nobody else knew it. It was hidden. Everything seemed fine, but under the surface, there was some danger there. And when 36 of the soldiers died, they came back to their camp, and Joshua and the leaders, they literally threw themselves on the ground in front of God and began to pray and seek the Lord and say, hey, what's going on here? And then God spoke to Joshua and said, listen, you didn't know, but Achan, or he didn't say Achan's name right up front, but he says there's somebody in your camp that stole something that didn't belong to them, and that's why God tells them my blessing wasn't on you. You went without my blessing. Because they didn't stop to seek God. What they did was they said, well, you know what? We destroyed Jericho so easily. We don't really need to call God for Ai. It's a smaller city. Let's just go in. And so they didn't seek the Lord. And because of that, they suffered. Because what they saw on the surface was different from what was lying beneath. Now, they repented and they sought the Lord, and God spoke to them and corrected the issue and the problem. But now we come to Joshua chapter 9. There's another problem. It's funny because oftentimes we think of Bible characters as like, well, they're holy and they're perfect and they don't make any mistakes. But that's what the Bible really, in a sense, is all about. It's about people, normal people like Joshua and others, so many others, that made huge mistakes, monumental mistakes, and how God reacted to them and led them through those mistakes and was able to work still on their behalf. And we love that part because we make mistakes. We're normal people. And to know that God forgives us and that we can move on from that mistake that's a big deal. We want to know about that. We love hearing about that. Here in Joshua chapter 9, we've got the story of Joshua and the children of Israel, again, who didn't seek the Lord, didn't learn their lesson, didn't seek their Lord, and we will see that. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. Some of you have been with us here on Wednesday nights. We've been going through Ephesians, and you remember this verse. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. What does it mean to walk circumspectly? It means that I'm walking around, aware of my surroundings. You ever seen somebody coming out of a store? I know you would never do this, or maybe probably coming out of school, and they got their phone and their face is glued to it, and they don't really know what's going on around them. I know you guys would never do that. Maybe your mom has, or your sister or something, and they're just locked into their phone. And you might see somebody walking through a parking lot and they're on their phone, so they're not even paying attention to where they're walking. They just know that my ride's over there somewhere, and they can be walking right down the middle of the aisle in the parking lot, and there can be cars behind them ready to run them over. But they're like, man, what's going on? Be real, let's go, and they're not paying attention. Again, I know none of you would ever do that, but it's what people do sometimes, oftentimes. Not walking circumspectly. This is not walking circumspectly. Circumspectly means my phone's put away and I'm looking around to see, what's coming, what's happening. Is there any danger waiting? People oftentimes get hurt or even killed because they're not paying attention, simply not paying attention. Driving while texting, not paying attention, and something happens. And that's what happened with me yesterday on the ladder. Got up on the ladder, the first sting came. Instead of looking around and checking a little bit closer to see what was under the surface, what did I do? Not scared of a wasp. Shoo that thing out of here, jump back up on that ladder, and then I got stung again, and it was just, I learned a very painful lesson. You better bet that from now on, when I grab my ladder, I'm going to be checking underneath the steps to see what's under there, spiders or wasps or whatever else might be hiding under there to try and kill me like that wasp was. Joshua chapter 9, I broke it up into two main divisions. Let's get those up here for you so that you can see what they are if you're taking notes, or even if you're not, mentally you can follow along. We're going to see a major fail in verses 1 to 15. And then in verses 16 to 27, just two main divisions, we will see that they find out the truth. Okay? Major fail in verses 1 to 15, and that's where we will start our time together here. It begins in verse 1 and 2 with telling us about this threat of an invasion. Let's look at it in verse 1. And it came to pass when all the kings who were on this side of the Jordan, in the hills and in the lowland, and in all the coasts of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, these are different people groups. The Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, remember that name, the Hivite, and the Jebusite heard about it, that they gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. So these were all cities with kings, and they heard that Joshua and the children of Israel were coming. So they decided, let's gather together, let's put aside our differences, let's gather together, and let's go meet Joshua and the children of Israel, and we'll destroy them right where they're at. Well, beginning in verse 3, we see, and I've got a subpoint here for you for those of you that take notes. Beginning in verse 3 down to verse 13, we see that Joshua and the children of Israel were fooled. Verse 3. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors. Now, an ambassador is somebody who's sent on like a peacekeeping mission or to discuss topics or details, issues. Countries, every country has ambassadors. There are American ambassadors all over the world in lots of different countries. Embassies, if you've ever heard of an embassy, the American embassy in France or the American embassy in Mexico or whatever, we've got ambassadors all over the place. And there are ambassadors from other countries here in the U.S. too. That's what ambassadors do. They discuss things, but they do that on behalf of their ruler, their king, their leader, their president. He or her might send ambassadors to another country to discuss matters. Well, they came, and it says that they pretended to be ambassadors. Now, the fact that they pretended to be ambassadors means that they were lying. Whatever's happening here, they were lying. This is not the first time that we've encountered liars in this new land, this what's called the Promised Land. In fact, when they were going into Jericho, There was a woman there named Rahab who had lied. She literally lied to save her life. And it actually worked. Now, that doesn't mean that you should take that lesson and go, oh man, I need to start lying more because that'll be a real blessing for me. That's not the lesson. She lied because it was normal to her, natural to her. These people lied because it was normal to them, natural to them. We see the same thing happening in our society today, right? It's a normal thing to lie. Everybody lies. It used to be that if you wanted to find out some news, that you would go to your news agency, whether it was on TV, the news, the morning news. They used to have these old things called newspapers. And the newspaper was a news paper. It was a paper with news in it. You would go there and you would read that. Not so much anymore. It's hard to find unbiased news. Whether you consider yourself to be a conservative or a liberal and you're looking for news, everybody's about sensationalism, even the so-called conservatives, all about sensationalism, whatever is going to get you the most views. And most of us now, if we're watching any kind of news or we're receiving any kind of news, it's probably through our social media outlets. And for you, it might be, Instagram, or it might be TikTok, or it might be whatever it is. And you receive little bits of information. What happens is we get literally little bits of information. And they'll show you a video of some crazy homeless person in San Francisco, and they'll say all of San Francisco is being just overran with these crazy homeless drug addicts. And in your mind, you've got a picture of San Francisco just totally, it's just World War Z, man. It's just zombies everywhere. Until you go there, and then you realize, oh yeah, there are some homeless people, and there are some crazy homeless people. However, they're not everywhere. And actually, they haven't taken over the entire city. And so we have to be careful, because lying is such a normal, natural part of our society. It ought never to be normal and natural for the Christian, for you and I. Lying ought never be easy. It ought to be something that if we do it, we sense the conviction of the Holy Spirit. It shouldn't be something that's good for us, or we're just good with it, and I just lie and it's not a big deal. That should be something that's not easy for us to do, but it was easy for these people that were living in that land to do, because there was no form of godliness. They didn't have a relationship with God. They had no reason to tell the truth. Lying is like, well, that's what you do, get yourself out of trouble, or to get yourself, something good. And so these people here in verse 4, it says that they worked craftily. We're going to see just how crafty they were. It says that they went and pretended to be ambassadors, and they took old sacks, that's not old socks, old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet in verse 5, and old garments on themselves, and all the bread of their provision was dry and moldy. They went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal and said to him to the men of Israel, we have come from a far country. Now therefore make a covenant with us. Now we'll get to verse 6 in just a moment. But did you notice what happened in verses 4 and 5? They were working craftily, and in their deceit, they put on old clothes and grabbed old gear and made it look that they had traveled from a very far place. Now, this is a danger, and it's a danger for you and I, and we would do well to learn the lesson. It's a danger for many of us in modern day, and that is that the outward appearance oftentimes can be deceptive. And that's how we normally make our initial assessment or judgment. We hear a lot today about, profiling. Don't profile people. Well, it's what we do. If somebody comes in the room and you turn and look as the door opens and they look like a crazed individual and they have a gun in their hand, should I make an assessment at that point? It probably would do me well to make an assessment. And they come in waving a gun. If I see that, I probably want to profile them and go, he or this guy or this woman has a gun and they're probably going to shoot somebody. Let me jump on the floor. I don't want to say, well, I'm a calm type of person and I don't jump to conclusions. And yes, I see you coming in with the door pointing it at me, but that doesn't mean you're going to shoot me. No, I want to make my assessment very quickly from outward appearances. Well, in this case, they had the right outward appearance. Everything looked old, everything looked worn. And we, at this point, we're going, well, I don't understand. Like, what good is that going to do then? We'll find out as the story unfolds. But understand that the outward appearance was convincing. And that's a danger for us. A major part of a teenage life is relationships. Major part. Whether it's friendships or whether it's a romantic relationship, dating, whatever it is, outward appearance is extremely example in the life of a teenager. Extremely example. Extremely important, I should say. And it's something that we use. We judge on outward appearance. And you might see somebody, a group of friends, and go, man, I really like the way that they look, and I really want to move in and kind of like, get to know them more. And you might be willing to change your outward appearance in order to match their outward appearance. And so that's something that we oftentimes do. So we have to be careful because oftentimes lying underneath that outward appearance is some danger. Just because they look right on the outside does not mean that they know God or that they're safe. They may, in fact, be leading you into danger, and so you've got to be careful. So these people here, they had the right outward appearance, and in fact, at the end of verse 5, it says, even their provision, their bread, was dry and moldy. It looked like they had that bread for a long time. And then it says in verse 6, and they went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal. So they go and they meet Joshua. And I want you to pay attention to this in verse 6. And they said to him and to the men of Israel, we have come from a far country. Now therefore make a covenant with us. So they're pretending like they've come from some other far country that is outside of the promised land. Now, in case you do not know, let me tell you what's going on. The promised land, what is that? Well, it really is modern day Israel. If you were to look at a map right now of modern day Israel, that's the promised land. It's land that God had promised to give to Israel. That's why it was called the promised land. Well, they were not allowed. God had warned Moses a long time before what you and I are reading. He had warned them, do not make a covenant or an agreement with anybody within that land because they all need to be cleared out. But there was no rule against making an agreement with people from outside that land. So guess what these guys did? They had heard about that. So they decided to act or pretend like they were from somewhere outside of that land. And they said, we have come from a far country. So make a covenant with us. Make an agreement with us. You see, they knew. They knew what God's word had said to Moses. And they said, hey, we came from far away, so it's safe. You can make a covenant with us. You can make an agreement with us. And in verse 7 it says, then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, wait, the Hivites? I've heard that word somewhere before. Yes, you have. In verse 1, it says the Hittite and the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite. So the Hivites, they were part of that original group that was going to attack Joshua and the children of Israel. What changed? Well, we'll find out what changed as we continue on in this story, but something changed. And they decided to pull themselves out of that group that was going to attack Joshua and the children of Israel. And they decided to lie and pretend that they were friendly people, and that's what they're doing here. So it says in verse 8, but they said to Joshua, look at this. I'm sorry, verse 7. Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, perhaps you dwell among us. So how can we make a covenant with you? He said, well, maybe you live here in the country, so how are we supposed to make an agreement with you? They said, we can't do that. Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, verse 8, but they said to Joshua, we are your servants. And Joshua said to them, who are you and where do you come from? It's a good couple of questions. Verse 9, so they said to him, from a very far country your servants have come because of the name of the Lord your God, for we have heard of his fame and all that he did in Egypt. Now there's a lot going on here. In verse 8 and 9, 2 times back to back, they use a word that would have been very appealing to Joshua and the Israelites. What was that word? It was the word servants, right? It's not a word that you and I like. We don't like for anybody to call us servants. If you've got an older brother or older sister, they may have at times over the years treated you like a servant. Go get me a PB&J, go, clean up the bathroom, go do these things. And they treated you like a servant, and they were older than you and bullied you, so you didn't really have a choice. You had to go do it. You might have a younger brother or younger sister, and you're like, hey, servant, go get me a PB&J. Whatever was done to you, you do to them. Bring me the remote. You might have a younger brother or younger sister who's sitting down watching TV or Netflix or whatever, and then you just come in and snatch the remote and start changing it. And they're like, hey, what are you doing? You're like, yeah, servant, get out of here. I'm royalty around here. I'm the one. I'm in charge. I watch what I want to watch. Get out of here. And they can oftentimes be treated like a servant. Well, I want you to notice what happened. These people, these Hivites, they show up with the correct outward appearance. Everything looked right on the outside because it looked wrong, because they looked like they had come from a far place, long ways away. So everything on the outward was right in the minds of Joshua and the children of Israel. But not only was it the things on the outside, but it was the things that they said too. They had the right language. What was it that they said? They said, we're your servants. We're here to serve you. We love that, right? We love to be served, man, for people to do stuff for us. If you have the responsibility of washing dishes at home, what a blessing. Or you've got the responsibility of vacuuming or dusting or picking up dog poop. Whenever somebody does those things for you, those tasks, you just feel like, oh man, love being served. We love to be served. And they show up and they say, hey, not only do we look right on the outside, but we've got the right language too. We're your servants. We are your servants. And note what they say in verse 9. From a very far country your servants have come, because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard of his fame and all that he did in Egypt. And they go on to say in verse 10, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. Now, it's what they say and what they do not say. What they say is, we're your servants. Oh, man, I love that. You're here to serve me? Okay, we're going to keep you around. But it's also what they do not say. What they do not mention here in verse 9 and 10, they say, we heard about the Lord your God, for we have heard of his fame, all that he did in Egypt, that was a long time ago, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites, who were on the other side of the Jordan. What they left out was Jericho and Ai. They didn't mention Jericho and Ai, and those were the most recent battles. Doesn't it seem like they would mention, hey, we heard what you guys did in Egypt and to the two kings of the Amorites and to Jericho and to Ai? No, their story was complete. You see, there was no modern way of sharing news back in those days. Believe it or not, there was a time before social media. There were no newspapers, no news agencies. So any news was spread. It was spread from person to person. They went out and talked and shared news. So if this group of people said, yeah, and we also heard what you did to Jericho and Ai, those were recent battles, then Joshua would have known, wait a minute, they're not from far away because they've heard recent news. They must be from nearby. Kill them. And so they made sure to leave that out. They were working, what does the Bible say? They worked craftily. They worked craftily. That's the way that we're oftentimes going to be tricked. Somebody may look right on the outside. They might have the right look. And they may say all the right things. But it's not until you dig a little bit deeper that you're going to find out that this individual is not genuine, not the real deal. Not the real deal. And they may even leave certain things out. It can be very easy to be hooked by those individuals. In the teenage life, one of the most important things is what? Relationships. Mentioned that, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend. A lot of you are like, yeah, man, that's what I need. I need a boyfriend or I need a girlfriend. You've got to be so careful because the individual may look right on the outside. They might have the hair, and the clothing, and the style. Might look right on the outside, and you might talk to them, and they may have the right words. It may seem to be, the man, they're just the whole package, man, on the outside. But have you waited, taken it patiently, and dug a little bit deeper to see what is this individual what are they all about? And oftentimes, under the surface of that outward appearance, you find out that that's all it was. There's no substance. It's just outward appearance. And you might get a little bit closer to this individual and realize something is not right. There's no substance there. It's just air upstairs. Or they've got some ulterior motive, to get something from me that I ought not be giving them. They didn't advertise that on the surface. They came looking smooth and suave and silky, saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, wearing the right perfume or cologne. And you're thinking, man, this is it. And you've got to be so very careful. Even in church, oftentimes in church, there are guys that are on the hunt. There are women that are on the hunt now. And they're only here looking for a partner, looking for somebody that they can deceive. On the outside, everything looks fantastic. And you talk to them and they go, oh man, yeah, hey, PTL, praise the Lord. And they may engage in worship and like, oh yeah, I'm all about worship. They may even leave information out, like the fact that they cuss all the time. They may go, oh no, I'm no cussing. I'm trying to hook up with this hottie right here. So let me just, she's a Christian, so let me play it cool. But the young ladies can do the same thing. Say the right things or not say the wrong things. Have the outward appearance. But it's not just in the realm of boyfriend and girlfriend. You've got to be careful. There are always people that are out and about looking to deceive us. So we've got to walk circumspectly, like Ephesians 5:15 says. We want to be on the lookout all of the time for people that might want to deceive us or harm us, hurt us. This week I got a message on through social media from a woman that's been a friend for a lot of years. Messaged, and she was asking, hey, can I please do this? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And then I asked for prayer. This is a sister in the Lord, so I asked for prayer for something. I said, hey, this is going on. Could you please pray for that? And then her response was like, I thought to myself, I don't know. I don't think so. So I actually just sent her a text like, hey, am I messaging with you right now on social media? And, she didn't respond, but I found out very quickly that it was not her. Somebody had hacked her account. And so I started playing along, me, being all weird. I started playing along like, oh, yeah, thank you. And, I'm trying to reel them in and started talking to them about the Bible, and they finally just say they realized what was going on. And they said, I hacked her account. I responded with, I figured that out a long time ago. And, continued to try to talk to them. Wasn't very fruitful, but you've got to be careful, right? Because there's people that are on the outside, the outward appearance, everything looks okay. They're saying the right things or not saying the wrong things. And you can get reeled in. So you've got to walk circumspectly. Be aware. What's there? We're your servants, they said, verse 8 and 9. We've come a far country, your servants have come. Verses 9 and 10, we heard about, all that God has done. And we'll look at here, what's going on? Does it feel like it's blowing out warm air? Anyways. Verse 11, therefore, they say, our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, take provisions with you for the journey, and go to meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Now therefore make a covenant with us. They say in verse 12, this bread of ours we took hot for our provision from our houses on the day we departed to come to you. But now look, it's dry and moldy. Verse 13, and these wineskins which we filled were new, and see, they are torn. And these our garments and these our garments and our sandals have become old because of the very long journey. So they're like, no, 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 look, like we look at our outward appearance, look at the things we have, look, and try to prove it to you. And he or she, they might have a Bible, and you might be like, oh yeah, well man, they got a Bible, that's fine, but have they actually opened it? You ever see them open it? If they've had a Bible and you go, how long you had that Bible? Oh, I've had it all my life. Really, it's funny, it looks brand new. Do you not read it? So you always want to be aware. Be aware of what's going on. Dig a little bit deeper. Now, here's where the fail takes place in verse 14. We see that the children of Israel were fooled, and that is because they forgot about the Lord. Verse 14 says, then the men of Israel took some of their provisions, but they did not ask counsel of the Lord. It's funny, you would have thought that Joshua would have learned from his loss and eye that, oh, you know what, we got to seek the Lord, but he didn't. This is Joshua. I love Joshua. Wonderful leader. Great Bible character, one of my favorites. But he's just a person, and he made mistakes. It's just like me and just like you. Trying to follow the Lord, but we make mistakes. And do you ever feel like, man, why do I just keep making the same mistakes over and over? Like I just keep falling into the same sin. Like, why is that? Well, the answer is right here. It's because they did not ask counsel of the Lord. I keep falling into the same mistakes, the same cycle, because I'm not seeking the Lord. I'm not asking the Lord. Look what Psalm 37, verse 34 says. Wait on the Lord. That's synonymous. That's a Bible term, Bible phrase. It's synonymous with praying, seeking the Lord. Wait on the Lord. We don't like that though, because we go, wait on the Lord, but he takes so long. Why is he so slow? Wait on the Lord and keep his way. In the meantime, as you're waiting, continue to live for him. And he shall exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you shall see it. In other words, wait for the Lord and he'll answer you. Joshua didn't do that. He didn't wait for the Lord. What he did instead was he took some of their provisions, he goes, oh, your bread is moldy and dry. And he actually based his decision on dry, moldy bread rather than on the Lord. But we can't look at him and go, ha ha, Joshua, what a dummy. We can't do that because we do the same thing oftentimes. We make our judgments based on outward appearance only. We cannot do that. We've got to walk circumspectly. We got to be looking around and digging in and going, wait, who is this person or what is this thing? And is it right for me or is it wrong for me? Is it going to be good for my faith or is it going to be harmful? My ladder yesterday looked like it was going to be good and trying to elevate me to accomplish my purpose, but in fact, it was hiding a secret there that was harmful or hurtful. That could have been dangerous had I been up at the top of that ladder with a chainsaw going and had one of these wasps sting me. So we've got to be careful. We've got to examine. Joshua didn't do that. The children of Israel didn't do that. They based their decision on some moldy bread. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild? I was at the mall the other day with my son, and we were going to grab lunch. And I saw Sbarro's there. I don't know if you guys have a Sbarro's. There are Sbarro's over here in this mall. Is there? Yeah, Sbarro's. I like Sbarro's, or at least I used to. I had Sbarro's. Got me one of those stuffed slices of pizza, and with cholesterol in it. And then I got me a salad to balance it off, and a Pepsi, just to be a little healthier. But I got ice in it. And then later on, man, I felt my stomach like, whoa, something's going on in my stomach, right? It looked good on the surface. Not so much. Something was going on inside of that food. We've got to be careful. We've got to dig in. We can't forget about the Lord. Verse 15 says, so Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the rulers of the congregation swore to them. So he went through. He was fooled by the moldy bread and the old clothes. This takes us into our second main division, which is finding out the truth in verses 16 through 27. And in fact, in verses 16 to 23, we have here our first subpoint, which is they heard the truth. Verse 16 says, and it happened at the end of 3 days. So they make the covenant, the agreement, deal's done. And after 3 days, it says that they heard that they were neighbors who dwelt near them. They heard the truth. Then in verse 17, the children of Israel journeyed and came to their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kirjath Jearim. These were the 4 cities that were involved in tricking the Israelites and in getting this covenant with them. It says in verse 18, but the children of Israel did not attack them. We say, wait a minute. They found out that they were lying. Yes, they did. But they didn't attack them, make them pay for it? No. Why? It tells us in verse 18, because the rulers of the congregation, that's Israel, the rulers of the children of Israel, had sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. In other words, they had invoked the name of the Lord. In other words, they were representing God in their agreement. And so because of that, they couldn't go back on their agreement. Same thing is true for you and I. We may find ourselves duped, man. We got fooled. We got tricked into something. But if I've made a commitment, I need to see that commitment through. The only time I want to not go through with that commitment is if it's something completely sinful. But they had made an agreement here. And so they couldn't go back on it. And it goes on to say in verse 18, and all the congregation complained against the rulers. Like, what did you guys get us into? Why would you do this? Verse 19, then all the rulers said to all the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. Now, therefore, we may not touch them. Can't do anything about it. You know, later on in the history of Israel, later on after this, they actually tried to break an agreement with Gibeon, and they got in trouble for it with God, for trying to break that commitment, that agreement. Verse 19 says, then all the rulers said to all the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. Now, therefore, we may not touch them. Verse 20, this we will do to them. We will let them live, lest wrath be upon us because of the oath which we swore to them. And the rulers said to them, let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for all the congregation, as the rulers had promised them. You see what they did? They said, you know what, we're going to let them live, but remember when they told us that they were our servants? Well, we're going to go ahead and make them our servants. And we're going to make them woodcutters and water carriers. And we might go, what kind of punishment is that? What kind of discipline is that? You ever chopped wood? Anybody in here ever chopped wood? Anybody? It is not easy, is it? That's hard work. It's hard work. It was even hard for Rocky, in that one movie. He was chopping wood as part of his workout. That's hard work. And we're not talking about using one of those log splitters, where it's all, gas power, and you just throw the log in there or whatever. No, when you're trying to chop wood, man, that's hard work. And what about carrying water? You ever tried to carry water? It's heavy. You get one of your hydro backpacks, and you're going on a hike or whatever, you fill that thing with water, you feel all cool, but that thing starts to weigh down on you. Can you imagine back in these days, you're carrying containers or buckets of water, you're chopping wood. That's hard work. That's laborious. And what Joshua and the children of Israel said was, remember when you called yourselves our servants? Well, that's exactly what you're going to be. We can't kill you because we made an oath. We made a promise before God. But you're going to be our servants. You're going to be our slaves. And that's what he tells them. And so it says in verse 22, then Joshua called for them and he spoke to them saying, why have you deceived us, saying we are very far from you when you actually dwell near us? Now therefore you are cursed, and none of you shall be freed from being slaves, woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God. Super important. Joshua is going to make them be servants specifically for the tabernacle or the temple. That's the place where they would worship God. And they don't have that set up yet, but they will in the future. And Joshua says, okay, when we set it up, you are servants. And you are going to make sure that there's always wood for the fire that burns in the temple. And you're going to make sure that there's always water for our sacrifices and cleansing. That was going to be their job. We'll talk some more on that as we get down to the end of our study time. And so it goes on to say in verses 24 through 27, not only did the children of Israel hear the truth, but now we find out why these people were so deceptive. It is because they heard the truth also. Verses 24 through 27. 24, so they answered Joshua and said, because your servants were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Therefore, we were very much afraid for our lives because of you and have done this thing. Now we find out. You see, earlier they had said, oh, we came because we heard about God and we heard about his fame. You see, they were deceptive in what they were saying. They made it sound like, hey, we're just here because we believe in your God and we just want to worship him because, we know how great he is. However, what we find out is that in reality, the reason they came was for fire insurance. Fire insurance? Yes. It's the same reason why so many people today are religious. It's fire insurance. Well, if I go to church, then I won't go to hell. Or if I have a Bible, then I can be saved. Or if I've got the Book of Mormon, then I'll be saved. Or if I get me a New World Translation from the Jehovah's Witnesses, then then that'll save me. Or if I add to that a Quran, or if I wear a Buddhist robe, or if I've got some prayer beads, or if I've got a cross or a Star of David. And some people, they try to add everything in, hoping that they can have some fire insurance. Like, man, one of these things will get me to heaven, save me from hell. So you've got to be careful again. Because there are people like that in church they're at church just for fire insurance, because in their minds they think, well, if I go to church, then I won't go to hell. You've got to be careful. You've got to dig in a little bit deeper and find out, what is this individual all about? Whether you're looking at that person and interested in them for romantic purposes, or whether it's just friendship, whatever it is, like, who is this individual? You got to watch their life. You got to walk circumspectly. In other words, you've got to observe and watch them. They heard the truth. And they tell the truth now. They say, hey, we are here. We came, we did this to you guys because we didn't want to die. It was self-preservation. That's what it was. We didn't want to die. Self-preservation. That's what they were all about. And that's what the majority of people are all about anyways. They're about self-preservation. Who's, how can I preserve my life? How can I be safe? Like what's going to keep me alive? And that's what they were doing. In verse 25, it says, and now here we are in your hands. Do with us as it seems good and right to do to us. So he did to them and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Israel so that they did not kill them. And that day Joshua made them woodcutters and water carriers for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord in the place which he would choose, even to this day. Now we'll finish with a couple of questions. First question is this: how can I avoid being tricked by the enemy? How can I avoid being tricked by the enemy? The Bible teaches that there is a Satan and that he came to kill, steal, and destroy. Now, it's not always him working personally in our lives, but he has demons, fallen angels, demons that he also sends out as his ambassadors to also try to trip us up. How can I avoid being tricked by them, by the enemy? First of all, what I want to do is number one, I want to stay aware. I want to stay aware. You ever heard this, the saying, hey, if you stay ready, you won't have to get ready. That's the idea. Stay aware. It's Ephesians 5:15. I need to walk circumspectly. I need to know what's going on, my surroundings. Outside, sure, people, yes, but more so spiritually. I want to be walking circumspectly. I want to be living circumspectly and going, hey, what's going on with this person? They look great on the outside. They say nice things. They say the right things. They don't say the wrong things. They sound perfect, but I need to examine. I need to dig in a little bit deeper and see, are they really following the Lord? Or is this somebody who is, there's something underneath the surface that's hurtful or harmful? I want to stay aware, number one. Joshua and the children of Israel, they underestimated their enemies. They were not aware. They saw moldy bread and they were convinced. Not for you and I, right? We're not going to fall that easily. We're going to be on the lookout. Stay aware. Secondly, how can I avoid being tricked by the enemy? I want to seek the Lord. That was their one big fatal mistake. Even if they were still looking at the moldy bread and like, oh, maybe these guys are telling the truth, they could have stopped at some point and said, wait a minute, you guys wait here. I need to go talk to God. But they didn't do that. Didn't seek the Lord, verse 14 told us. You and I want to make sure that we're seeking the Lord. Seeking the Lord means that I'm praying, that I'm asking the Lord. And let me just give you a little tip here from an old man. If I'm following the Lord closely on a daily basis, on the daily, I'm following the Lord, walking with the Lord, that I don't necessarily need to go out seeking him to find out where he is. If he's there, all I need to do is talk to him. I need to seek his counsel. Say, God, give me some wisdom here. I'm not sure what to do. Tell me how to best address this issue or this problem. Seek the Lord. Pray, ask for his counsel. They didn't do that. They didn't stay aware. They didn't seek the Lord. So you and I in our relationships and the things that we're doing, the decisions that we're making, we want to make sure that we're staying aware and seeking the Lord. God, what do you want? How are you going to lead? One of my favorite prayers, and it's a prayer that I pray all the time, is, Lord, direct me today throughout the day, even when I don't know it. I want God to direct me, even if I don't know. I'm a ding dong sometimes. And I don't always need to know when God's leading me somewhere. God, you just go ahead and lead me. Direct me, direct my thoughts, my actions. You and I need to be aware, and we need to seek the Lord. Here's the second and final question. What do I do if I have already been tricked? And I find myself already in some situation, some circumstance, and I go, oh man, I didn't seek the Lord, I didn't pay attention, I blew it, and now here I am in the midst of this mess. Like, what am I going to do? Well, there are some situations that you can't get out of, but others where you've made a commitment, just like I'm here now. What am I going to do? What you want to do is do what Joshua did. I love how he recovered here. The answer, there's just one answer here, and it is use your circumstance to push you closer to the Lord. You find yourself deceived and you're in some kind of relationship that it's just a rough relationship. Use that to push you closer to the Lord. How does that work, Pastor Chris? I'll tell you. It works this way. Every time you think about that circumstance, that mistake that you made, and now I'm in the middle of it and I can't get out of it yet, and you're in the middle of it, use that to push you closer to the Lord. Every time you see that person or that circumstance or you think about it, commit it to the Lord. Lord, you know that this is what I got going on. I made a mistake. Confess that, Lord, but I pray that you would rescue me. I pray that you would give me wisdom. I pray that you would help me. You use that. Did you see what Joshua did with the people? Joshua, he took these liars and he said, okay, from now on, you are going to work. And what was he using them for? He was going to use them for sacrifice. His relationship, the spiritual well-being of the children of Israel, that's what he was using his mistake for. Use your mistake to get you closer to the Lord. Yeah, you blew it. Join the club. We mess up. We make mistakes. All of us do. I have. I will. But when we make a mistake, what we want to do is use that to push us closer to the Lord. Keep me praying. Keep me seeking the Lord so that I don't make the same mistake. Keep asking him for help through that issue, through that problem. Do what Joshua did. Let's pray, and then I have a few announcements before you